مردم شریف ایران، من شهریار افشار هستم، میزبان شما در Politics 365. امروز یکی از دوستان خودمون رو به برنامه مجددا دعوت کردیم، جاناتان هارناف. ایشون یه ژورنالیست هستش که در چندین زمینه خاورمیانه و اسرائیل مقاله نوشتن، ریسرچ کردن و چندین بارم به برنامه ما پیوستن و به ما کمک کردن که حوادث که در اسرائیل اتفاق افتاده و نقش ایران در تمام این موضوعهای خاورمیانه چی بوده و به چه نتیجه میتونیم از این جریان بگیریم. بقیه برنامه به انگلیسی هستش و گفتگومون این هفته با جانی در مورد انتخابات ایران هستش و در انتخابات آمریکا و چه روابطی شاید این دوتا موضوع به هم دیگه داشته باشن و چه نتیجه ما میتونیم از این موضوع بگیریم. خیلی ممنون. Jonathan Harounoff, welcome back. Thanks for bearing with us as I introduced you in Farsi. You know, the U.S. elections are just dominating U.S. airwaves. They're just, you cannot, everyone's obsessed. It's like watching a car crash. You know, some people say, it's two old men, two grumpy old men running for office. Some people say the choices are between, hell no and oh no. Because, they don't like their choices. But whoever becomes the president of the United States will have massive ramifications across NATO, Middle East, U.S.-Israeli relations, U.S., I can't say relations with Iran, but repercussions are going to be just massive because these two presidents cannot have more polar opposite views of the world and how they plan to execute a foreign policy that will affect all of our lives to the extent that it can. And of course, all this is happening in the backdrop of Iran's recent elections. Some people say, and this is, I guess he used to be a heart surgeon, Dr. Pezeshkian, and his name Pezeshkian is funny because it says physician in his name, actually in Farsi, is a reformist, but a great number of Iranian diaspora are highly skeptical. Is he a reformist? He's already said some things in support of Hezbollah and the IRGC. Is he saying it because that's his job? Is he saying it because he means it and we shouldn't expect anything? So what I wanted to talk with you about is really these two elections and how they're going to be campaigns and how they're going to be affecting our worldview and also U.S. relations with Israel and Iran.
It's great to be with you again, and I think these two elections have and will have tremendous impact on their own countries and on the world as we see today, especially the Middle East. With the United States, you rightly mentioned that President Biden and former President Trump have very different visions of what the Middle East would look like under their presidency. If we're just looking at Iran, President Biden has adopted an approach of quiet diplomacy, soft diplomacy, concessions in the hope that Iran would return in kind and dial down the chaos that it's causing throughout the region, and it hasn't done that so far. The only kind of diplomacy that we've seen be successful on Iran's side is kind of hostage diplomacy, which benefits no one. It just makes the Islamic Republic wealthier at the expense of captured Americans, and we don't want to see more of that taking place. And under former President Trump, he had adopted a much more aggressive posture towards the Islamic Republic, one of maximum pressure, zero compromise, and sort of forced negotiation, forced diplomacy. And there are some camps believe that that is the only language that the Islamic Republic understands. It doesn't understand your traditional, conventional kind of diplomacy. So this November, whoever ends up running for the Democratic Party and against Trump, that will very much shape the US's foreign policy towards Iran. In terms of the elections in Iran, there were absolutely, the Islamic Republic was very, very vocal about highlighting the fact that Pezeshkian was this reformist figure. And it does, if you would have said a couple of months back that there would have been a reformist on the ballot who was approved by the Guardian Council, approved by the Supreme Leader, you would have thought that was, insane. That wouldn't happen, especially following the presidency of Ibrahim Raisi, who was very much a yes man, sort of a conservative cleric who did everything that he was told. But in fact, what happened was a reformist was on the ballot against a more hardline opponent in Jalili, and he won, even though the turnout was extremely low, historic lows. He still won. Some argue that he is in fact a reformist. He has sort of shown sympathy towards, let's say, the women life freedom protesters. He suggested that the approach adopted by the Islamic Republic was quite aggressive, and he sort of suggested that it should be done in more dignity, the way the government is managing these protests. But on the other side, I think it's a bit simplistic to assume that the supreme leader and the Islamic Republic in general would have allowed a real reformist to operate in this system. And ultimately, Pezeshkian is, the reason why he was chosen to be president and allowed to run is because he is another yes man. He is going to do everything that he is told to do. He doesn't have an enormous amount of power himself. He's more of a sort of an administrative figure. And there's no reason to suggest so far that he's going to, take the Islamic Republic in any other direction when it comes to foreign policy. He's already expressed sympathy towards Hezbollah. He's already condemned Israel as the Zionist enemy. He has mentioned that he has a desire to, revive relations with the US and perhaps Europe as well, and sort of reinvigorate an Iran nuclear deal. But that doesn't suggest that Israel and Iran are going to, be warming relations anytime soon.
Right. And, to get to your earlier point about how did Pezeshkian even get through the Guardian Council, that is very telling in and of itself, because I can tell you the regime can be blamed for a great number of things, but one thing they're very good at is pacifying the masses, right? Mm-hmm. They have a innate ability to go to the edge of collapse and walk back. And, they had somebody like Raisi, the butcher of Tehran, as a president until he literally, got the justice he deserves. But now they could see the unrest, and they could see the attention that they don't want, this type of attention, human rights violations and conflicts with Israel, open conflict with Israel. So they allowed this ornamental figure to get through the system. But what can he do structurally? Because even if he says tomorrow women don't have to wear the veil, and there'll be all kinds of internal forces fighting him on this. There'd be all kinds of skirmishes in the streets of Tehran and Hamadan and Esfahan and all the different cities. We see it on social media already. Today, any day you go on social media, you'll see current skirmishes between the morality police and the women and the people of Iran that are trying to protect them. So there hasn't been any immediate change. And even if there is tomorrow, it'll be on an ornamental, superficial level, right? The hijab, I know it's important to the people of Iran, but that's not reform, that's not change, that's not security, that's not freedom. That is just a very limited activity. And he could come to the United Nations and shake hands and be all smiles, as previous presidents have tried to do. But so I guess my question is, what can we really expect beyond the hijab? He has no say. Whatever he says about Hezbollah and foreign security and foreign policy is the domain of Ali Khamenei, not the president. So between that and the hijab, what can the president do to make lives better, do you think?
Look, so ultimately what we could probably expect Pezeshkian's presidency to usher in a sort of maybe perhaps a different tone and style to his predecessor, Ibrahim Raisi. But, those changes in tone and style and rhetoric don't always, or never in the Islamic Republic, translate into like real power and substantive change. As you rightly said, ultimate authority rests with the supreme leader. So even if Pezeshkian at the UN General Assembly later this year, gives a rousing speech about how his presidency heralds a new era for the Islamic Republic, one of substantial reforms and like an improvement in women's rights and the rights of people in general. That doesn't actually mean that that will actually happen until something actually happens. These are just empty words. And it's given the Islamic Republic's track record, we're very unlikely to see significant change, within the existing framework of the Islamic Republic. So I think, in answer to your question, the main changes we'll probably see is perhaps in tone, style, posture, rhetoric, maybe some increased interactions with European counterparts and US counterparts, but substantive change is still a distance away.
And I think you touched on a very important point. He can say this is not your father's Islamic Republic. This is the new Islamic Republic. But therein lies the problem. It doesn't matter how shiny and pretty they try to make the regime. What the people of Iran, inside and outside, have categorically rejected is this system of government. It doesn't matter if you let them, take the hijab off. It doesn't matter if they even improve the economy, find jobs. I've seen Pezeshkian on Iranian TV talk about how the system. These videos looked like they're trying to make Pezeshkian look good, right? So I've seen him take on the system and the apparatus of government when he was a minister, and say, look, you're a poor individual makes X number of tomans a month, and that's like 1,000 times less than what a typical car will cost.
Yeah.
So there is no more middle class in Iran. There's only the elite, and the great majority are almost living at a poverty-like level because of the economic policies of this regime, and the fact that the elite and the Islamic Republic Guard are sucking up all the businesses and the economic structures of the industries in Iran, leaving nothing to entrepreneurs, businesses, unless you're part of their own elite system. So he cannot. The job, to be honest, is the least of our problems. When those structural issues are at play, and you see the Iran Mall, you've seen massive community projects and shopping malls and expensive cars. Those are all Islamic Republic elite and IRGC controlled industries, not ordinary Iranians that want to pursue the Iranian dream, right? So he cannot change that because it's not him. It's not even that. It's the system that is suffocating the people of Iran. So you're right. The tone, the smiles, you can have that all day till the cows come home, as they say. But you're not going to be able to change the system. And until the system moves towards wholesale reform, or European and other countries begin to use the word regime change, which they never do, but most of them stick to pacifying or accepting the regime as it is, then you still have what you have. You just defer some pain for a little bit, and then sooner or later it'll come back in another form. The undermining, funding Hezbollah, the Houthis, undermining Israeli security, undermining American security. So that's really the problem. It's the system. It's not really the figurehead that comes and goes. And I think the Iranian diaspora has a lot of good reason to be skeptical of this new president, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's a reason. That's absolutely right. And there's a reason why Pezeshkian was not allowed to run in the 2021 election. He was allowed to run in this election because he's not seen as a real wild card as he may have been portrayed in some media outlets. He is considered, even though he's got this moniker of reformist, he's considered a safe bet for the Islamic Republic. In fact, someone who they could use to their advantage, presenting as someone who's a reformist figure who doesn't actually have the capacity or the authority to enact real reforms. And in terms of what you mentioned ordinary Iranians wanting real regime change, like real structural reform, is that's what made the previous right uprising, the Mahsa Amini uprising, so different to prior uprisings, because in the past, so many when people did rise up, let's say in 2009 in the Green Revolution, or in 2017, 18, there was mass unrest, mass discontentment, but ultimately people were looking for change within the system of the Islamic Republic. Internally, they were okay, I guess, with continuing with the current regime as is, but as long as there are substantial changes. What changed in the Women Life Freedom movement, even though it ultimately failed in its ultimate objective, was that people were done with the Islamic Republic. They wanted an entirely new government in place. And that's a very bold, ambitious goal. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why the movement didn't succeed, is because there wasn't a clear enough vision of what a post-Ayatollah Iran would look like. There was a huge consensus among many over what they didn't like, i.e. the regime, but there wasn't enough of a consensus and momentum in terms of what would come next.
Right. And really, I know that's the concern of many American, European leaders, what is the alternative? But I will just, put a finer point on what you said about the people of Iran being okay with it. In my view, if somebody's in prison for life, at some point you accept your fate. Like, you're in prison, and you have to make the best of it, right? You have to get up every morning, you pay for your crimes, and not that the people of Iran have done anything, but the people of Iran, to some degree, some of them may have accepted that they're in prison. They can't get out. Nobody will help them, and they have to make the best, life they can for themselves until they get out, until they make parole, right? Until they get out of this prison. I don't think the great majority of Iran, anyone accepts the regime. It's just that they've had 45 years to grow, tighten their grip on every aspect of society in Iran, from the newsstand down the street, there are agents of the regime, to universities. I've talked with PhD students to say, if you're not part of the regime, part of the establishment, or the Aghazadehs, the Ayatollahs network, you're not going to get a job. It doesn't matter how many PhDs you have. You're not going to have any economic opportunities when you get out of college. So I think that is the problem, apart from European and American countries not really having the courage to imagine Iran free of the regime. There is no in between. The people of Iran don't have another alternative to say. All they know is they don't want the regime, and they don't care what comes in its place. I've seen a great number of internal conversations in Iran, and for the most part, everyone says, we don't care. Anything is better than this. That's the message I get. Anything is better than the regime. So you can have president reformers come and go all day, but it's still the regime. And that's really the fundamental problem. We're going to have to wrap up, but we're going to keep watching the US elections, obviously, to see who gets. Seems like Trump is well ahead. What's he going to do with Iran? Is he going to continue to send missiles to visiting Iranian generals as they go around outside the country? Will Israel? I know Israel certainly de-escalated the issue right away, but they sent a couple of missiles and landed next to Natanz and Esfahan, and basically to prove the point that we can shoot, we can land, and we can start and go anytime we want. So both sides kind of showed their cards. Iran sent hundreds of missiles and nothing went anywhere, and Israel landed a couple and stopped, and they both stopped. This is the very interesting thing. They both stopped, which I think certainly is what Biden wanted. But now, if Trump is going to get in, what is going to be his new? Is he going to make Iran a priority? Is it going to? I literally have talked with people where they say they have no idea what Trump may do on Iran. There's no foreign policy, unless it's in Project 2025. There's no foreign policy on Iran. We may have to stop it there. I'm sorry. I know you probably don't want to. I know you want to comment on that, but we'll keep talking. Next time we meet, we're going to talk about Iran's propaganda in some of the anti-Israeli protests in the U.S., propaganda, maybe the plot against Trump that was widely reported on. Iran continues its propaganda all over the world, but these particular instances in maybe interfering in U.S. elections in so many ways by that plot, that is significant. That is enough to really get eyebrows raised. Johnny Harounoff, thanks so much for joining us. You're a wealth of information and a great resource for us to check into. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.